The day my son David brought Sophia home, nobody prepared me for how quickly my world would crumble. I was standing in my kitchen baking his favourite apple pie when they walked through the door. David was grinning from ear to ear, his face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Mum, this is Sophia," he said, and I watched her step forward. She was beautiful, with a graceful way about her, and she praised my pie like a true connoisseur. Her eyes, however, seemed to be sizing up everything about me, from my simple apron to my old comfortable shoes. I just thought she was shy. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Margaret," she said, her voice like honey. She had the kind of smile that made you trust her, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She talked about her job, her travels, and her plans for the future. She was so perfect, I wondered what she saw in my simple boy. Later, as David and I chatted on the porch, I saw her look at me through the living room window. That sweet smile was gone. In its place was something cold and sharp. I had to wonder what she was really thinking. What I didn't know then was that her plan had just begun. It started slow, like the first frost of winter. At first, David called me every night just to talk. Then it was every other night. Then a few times a week. I'd be in my living room watching TV and the phone would ring less and less. When I asked him about it, he'd say, "Sophia's just helping me be more independent, Mum." I felt a pang of hurt. Was I really holding him back? My neighbour Eleanor, who always watched my back, told me not to worry. "They're young, Margaret," she said on her porch one afternoon. "Give them space." I tried to believe her, but my heart was heavy. When I did see David at the grocery store, his visits were shorter. He'd hug me quickly, tell me he was busy, and rush off. I told myself it was normal, that I was just being a clingy old woman. The real shock came a few weeks later. I was in the local diner, looking through my phone, when I saw a picture pop up on Facebook. It was David, on one knee holding a ring. The caption read, "She said yes." I stared at the photo. My own son's engagement, a moment I should have been part of, announced to the world before it was ever told to me. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped my coffee. David called me a few days later, excited as a kid on Christmas. "Mum, we found a house," he yelled into the phone. "A little place in the country with a big yard." I was so happy for him. My first thought was how I could help. Maybe bring over some of my old furniture or bake a welcome cake. "I can't wait to see it," I said. There was a pause. Then Sophia took the phone. Her voice was sweet as ever, but there was an icy edge to it. "Oh, David and I want this to be our own space, Margaret," she said. "We want to make it our own, just for us." My heart sank like a stone in a pond. I tried to sound brave. "Of course, dear. Just let me know the address so I can send you a housewarming gift." She laughed, a short, humourless sound. "Oh, don't worry about that," she said. "You'll never know the address." The words were simple, but they hit me hard. I could almost see her smiling, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a smile that promised I would never be welcome in their new home. It was the moment I realised her coldness was no accident. This was a plan. A few days later, David called me back. His voice was all soft and uneasy, like a boy who'd just broken his mother's favourite vase. "Mum," he started, "Sophia just wants us to have our own space. It's about boundaries." He said the word boundaries like it was a rule he was forced to follow. I could tell he didn't like it, not really. My heart ached for him, and for me. I wanted to tell him it was a terrible rule, but he was a grown man now. He had his own family, even if that family was just him and Sophia. He talked and talked, trying to make me understand her side. He said it was for their independence, but all I heard was that I wasn't welcome. Later that day, my neighbour Eleanor saw me on my porch. She came over with 2 cups of coffee. "He called you, didn't he?" she asked. I just nodded, a tear rolling down my cheek. Eleanor said, "You give them some space, Margaret. They'll come around." But I had a cold feeling in my bones that they wouldn't. I felt stuck between respecting their new life and feeling like I was being punished. That night I decided to do something sneaky. I logged into my computer and looked at David's social media page. What I found was a picture of him and his old college friend. In the comments, the friend wrote, "Thanks for the new address, man. Can't wait to come over." It was a knife twist to the heart. After that, things got worse. Every time I tried to plan something, I hit a wall. "Hey David, you and Sophia want to come over for a cookout on Saturday?" I'd ask. He'd say, "Let me check with Sophia." A few hours later, he'd call back with a polite excuse. "We have other plans," he'd say. "Maybe next time." It happened with birthdays, with holidays, even with my own anniversary. I started to keep a little notebook. I wrote down every time I was rejected. My son David was slowly being taken from me. It became a whole pattern. My calls would go to voicemail and then a text from Sophia would pop up saying they were busy. She was a gatekeeper, and I was the one standing on the outside. One afternoon, I called David while I was at the grocery store. I wanted to ask him if he wanted me to pick anything up for him. Sophia's voice answered, not his. She sounded mad. "He's busy," she snapped, her voice like a sheet of ice. I said, "I just wanted to..." But before I could finish, she hung up on me. My hands shook so much I dropped the carton of eggs I was holding. The silence on the phone was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I was at the hardware store buying a new lock for my screen door when I ran into David's old childhood friend, Mark. "Hey, Mrs. Margaret," he said with a big smile. "Long time no see." We talked for a minute about the weather and my garden. Then I asked him if he'd seen David lately. His smile faded. "No, Ma'am," he said, looking at the floor. "I haven't seen him in months. I tried calling a few times, but he never called back." My heart jumped a little. It wasn't just me. Something was wrong. "I'm worried about him," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark looked up and his face was full of hurt. "Me too," he said. "It's not like David to just disappear." That's when I realized this wasn't just about me and my feelings anymore. Sophia was cutting him off from everyone who cared about him. Mark looked at me, his eyes big and sad. "The last time I talked to Sophia," he whispered. "She told me David doesn't want old friends anymore, but I just don't believe it. After talking to Mark, my heart was a mess, but my head was clear. Something was very wrong with my son, David. This wasn't just about my feelings anymore. So I started my own quiet investigation. I went to the church and spoke with my pastor, who also knew David. "Have you seen David lately?" I asked. "It seems like he's just vanished." The pastor looked sad. "His wife, Sophia, told me they found a new church closer to their home," he said. "He said she told him they were too busy for their old friends." I started calling old friends of my son's. I'd asked simple questions, and the answers were always the same. "Oh, Sophia said David wasn't interested in our old poker night anymore. Sophia told us he and I were too busy to go golfing." It was like a spider weaving a web. I wasn't just a sad mother. I was a detective trying to figure out where her son went. I even called his boss, an old man who knew David since he was a boy. I said I was just checking in. He said, "David's a good worker, Margaret, but he seems different. He never talks to us anymore. He just keeps to himself." That's when I knew for sure. My son was being cut off from his whole world, one person at a time. I felt like an old-fashioned spy, but I had to get smarter. I went to the public library and had the librarian show me how to look at things online. It was a new world, a big and scary place, but I needed to know what was happening to my son. I went to his social media page, the one where I saw his engagement. I couldn't see anything. I wasn't blocked, not exactly, but everything was set to private. I could only see what Sophia posted. She would post pictures of her and my son David, smiling and looking so perfect. They would be at a park or a fancy restaurant, always alone. It was like they were living in their own small, perfect world, with no room for anyone else. They looked so happy, but a part of me knew it wasn't real. It was a show, a story she was telling. I felt a pang of hurt and anger. I was so used to hearing about everything from him, and now I had to learn about his life from a computer. Then I saw a post from a few months ago. It was a photo of David holding an award. The caption said he was promoted to a new, better job. It had happened weeks ago. He had never told me. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it would jump out of my chest. I couldn't wait for him to call me back. I couldn't wait for another one of Sophia's lies. So, I did something I had never done before. I called my son David directly at his office. The secretary answered, and I gave her my name. "Tell him it's his mother," I said, trying to sound calm. A few moments later, he picked up the phone. "Mum, is everything okay?" He sounded surprised, like he hadn't heard my voice in forever. "David, I've been trying to call you," I said, my voice shaky. "Did you not get any of my messages?" He sounded confused. "No, Mum, I haven't gotten anything. I thought you were mad at me for not calling." My heart broke into a million little pieces. I was right. She was stopping our talks. I started to explain everything, to tell him about the phone calls and the messages, how I thought he was mad at me. I heard his voice a little confused as I talked. And then he said, "Wait, what are you doing? I gotta go." The line went dead. I heard a click. It wasn't a bad connection. Someone had ended the call from his side. After the phone call with David ended so fast, I was fit to be tied. I sat there on my couch, my old heart pounding. I knew for a fact that wasn't my son's idea. He sounded so confused and lonely. Just as I was about to go crazy, my phone rang. It was David's Aunt Carol, my sister-in-law. I hadn't heard from her in a long time. She sounded worried. "Margaret," she said, her voice low. "Have you heard from David lately?" I told her what had been happening. And then, she told me her story. Sophia had told her a few months ago that David had a problem with her kids and asked her to not call so much. It was the same song, just a different verse. We talked and talked, comparing all the lies Sophia had told us. She had even told David's cousin that he was mad at him for something he didn't even do. We realized it was a pattern. Sophia wasn't just mad at me. She was mad at everyone who loved my son. My pain started to turn into a hard, cold anger. I wasn't alone anymore. We were two old women trying to save our boy. Aunt Carol then dropped a bomb on me. "You know," she said, her voice shaking, "I found out she even looked up all of our old records, like our bank accounts and how much money we all have. Why would she do that?" My conversation with Aunt Carol had me so worried I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I decided to take a big risk. I made a big pot of David's favourite chili and drove straight to his office downtown. The place was all glass and steel, very fancy. I told the woman at the front desk I was just bringing lunch for my son, David. She let me up. When I found him, he was sitting at his desk looking tired and pale. He didn't look like my happy boy anymore. When he saw me, he looked surprised, then a little scared. "Mum, what are you doing here?" he whispered, looking around. I put the chili on his desk. "Just wanted to make sure you were eating well," I said, trying to smile. We talked for a few minutes, but he was jumpy like a rabbit in a field. He said Sophia had their whole life planned out on a special calendar and he wasn't allowed to change it. He was a prisoner in his own life. My heart ached for him. Then, he said something that almost knocked me over. "I'm sorry I missed Mark's wedding, Mum. Sophia said I wasn't allowed to go." I knew then that my son was not a willing participant in any of this. I was sitting in my living room that night, my mind still reeling from seeing my son David so unhappy. The phone rang, and I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hello?" I said. A voice I hadn't heard in months came on the line. It was Sophia. Her voice wasn't sweet anymore. It was hard and sharp like broken glass. "Margaret," she said, "I am calling to tell you that you need to back off. You are not respecting our marriage." She had dropped the act. and I could hear the real her for the first time. She went on, telling me to stop calling, to stop visiting his work. She said he was a married man now and I was just an old woman who couldn't let go. I felt madder than a wet hen. "I'm his mother," I said. She laughed, a cold, dry sound. "Not anymore," she said. "If you don't stop, I will make sure we move far, far away. We'll go across the country, and then you'll never see him again. Do we understand each other?" The line went dead before I could answer, leaving me with a chilling threat. She was taking my son, and now she was making sure I knew it. After Sophia's terrible threat, I was shaking so much I could barely stand. But then a new feeling rose up in my chest, a hot, fiery feeling. I had let her push me around for too long. I wasn't going to let her steal my son from me. So I called her back, my voice as steady as I could make it. "Sophia," I said, "I'm not backing off. I am David's mother, and I have a right to talk to my son." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then she laughed, a mean, cold laugh. "You don't have any rights here, Margaret," she said. "You are just an old woman who can't let go." I stood up straight, holding the phone tightly. "Put David on the phone," I said, my voice full of steel. "I want to talk to him right now." Her voice went from cold to downright scary. "Don't you ever tell me what to do," she hissed. "You have no idea what I'm capable of. I have every single one of your conversations recorded, Margaret. Every single one of them. The phone calls, the voice messages, everything." My stomach dropped. I had to choose between my family and my soul, and I chose my son. The thought of Sophia recording me gave me the creeps. I felt like I was being watched all the time, even when I was alone in my living room. I needed to know what she was telling David. I went back to my computer and I sent David a message through an old email address we used to share. It was a simple message. "Are you happy?" I wrote. "Are you really happy?" A few hours later, he replied with a short, confused email. He said he was happy. I wrote back, "Are you happy that Sophia told me you didn't want to see me?" He wrote back so fast. "What? Sophia said you told her you were too busy for me." My blood went cold. She had been twisting everything I said. She had told him lies and used my own words against me. He had been mad at me all this time for something I never even said. This wasn't just a bad marriage. This was a war. I was fighting for my son's mind. Then, late that night, there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole. It was David. He looked pale and panicked, like he'd just seen a ghost. I opened the door and pulled my son David into my arms. He was shaking. "Mom," he whispered, his voice thin. "Did you really say you were too busy for me?" I hugged him tighter. "Never, honey," I said. "Never." We sat at my kitchen table, and I made him a cup of warm milk. He talked for a while, telling me about all the little things Sophia had told him. She had told him his cousins were bad people, and that his friends were a bad influence. She even said I was trying to turn him against her. He looked so lost, like a little boy who couldn't find his way home. I saw how she had broken his spirit, how she had made him afraid to have his own thoughts. "Why did she lie?" he asked, his eyes wide. I didn't have a good answer. "She just wants you all to herself, honey," I said. He drank his milk and looked at the clock on the wall. A panicked look came over his face. "I have to go, Mum," he said, jumping up from the table. "Sophia will be worried." And he was gone. He was still worried about her feelings, even after everything I just told him. My grandson David's midnight visit was a whisper of hope, a tiny crack in Sophia's wall. But she didn't like that. The next morning, the phone started ringing, and it wasn't good. My sister-in-law, a cousin, even my own brother called, all with the same cold tone. "Margaret," my brother said, his voice flat. "I heard you've been causing problems with David's new family." It was like a poison spreading through the whole family tree. Sophia had been busy. She was telling everyone that I was a bitter old woman who was trying to break up her marriage. She had told them I was crazy, that I was making things up because I was lonely. Some of them believed her. It hurt so much to hear my own family turn against me. My neighbour Eleanor saw me looking sad at the community centre. "You can't let her get to you," she said. But it was hard. She was twisting my story and making me out to be a monster. I had to stop crying and start thinking. This was no longer just about me wanting to see my son. This was a battle for my name. The last call was from my late husband's father, an old man who was hard of hearing and very trusting. "Margaret," he boomed, "I heard you're trying to get a hold of our David. Sophia told me you're sick and that's why you're bothering them. You need to get some help." My own father-in-law, taken in by her lies. It was a new low. After my father-in-law's call, I realised how far Sophia would go. This wasn't just about visits and phone calls. She was trying to take my son's whole life. My mind went back to my visit to his office, how thin he looked, how he had said he wasn't allowed to go to his friend's wedding. I started thinking about everything he had lost, his old friends, his hobbies, his family. She wasn't just controlling him, she was erasing who he was. My heart ached for the boy I raised. I decided I couldn't just be a victim anymore. I had to fight back. I knew I couldn't fight with my feelings. I had to fight with facts. I went back to my notebook. I wrote down everything I knew, the lies she told, the times he was cut off, the way he looked. It was a long list. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about saving my son from a woman who was slowly stealing his life. I called my son's best friend, Mark, who I hadn't talked to since the hardware store. "Have you heard from David at all?" I asked. "We tried to get him to come out for our old poker night, but he never showed up," Mark said. "His boss told us he's been missing work but not getting any days off. We thought he was just avoiding us." I knew in my heart he wasn't. My talk with Mark made everything clear. This was the moment I had to choose. I could let Sophia win and lose my son, or I could fight and risk losing him forever. I knew that if I went to battle with her, there would be no going back. The family would be torn in two, and my son David might even get mad at me for making things public. But I couldn't stand by and watch her destroy him. It was a sad, hard choice, but it was the right one. My own peace was a small price to pay for my son's happiness. I sat in my old kitchen, the silence heavy around me, and I made a plan. I was going to stop being a victim. I would become his protector. I went to the phone book and started making calls. My hands were shaking, but my mind was calm and clear. I called his Aunt Carol first, who understood everything. "Carol," I said, my voice low and strong. "We need to talk about David. This is no longer a small problem. This is serious." The fight was officially on. I knew it would not be easy. After the phone call with my sister-in-law, Carol, I knew I couldn't do this alone. I called her and my brother, Jim. We met for coffee at the local diner, a place where everyone knew everyone. They looked so sad when I told them everything. The lies, the calls, the way my son David looked so tired. Jim, my brother, was a good man, but he didn't want to get involved. "Margaret," he said, shaking his head, "this is a family matter. We shouldn't get in the middle." But Carol saw the truth. She said Sophia had been poisoning their minds for years. I looked at both of them, and my voice got strong. "This isn't about a family matter anymore," I said. "This is about my son. She is hurting him." I told them my plan to reach out to more of David's old friends. I told them we needed to be a team. I was no longer a sad old woman. I was a general planning a war. I had to lead them. Jim still looked unsure, but Carol finally nodded. "What do we do?" she asked. Jim sighed, but he stayed. Then Carol's husband, my brother-in-law Tom, came in to join us. He listened to everything, and then, his face pale, he said, "I talked to David's lawyer last week about a land deal. He told me David came in and changed his will." My heart almost stopped. I went straight to my neighbour, Eleanor, who was much better with computers than me. I told her what Tom had said about the will. She told me to sit down. "Margaret," she said, her eyes serious, "you're not doing this alone." She got on her computer and started looking up Sophia. We looked at her past jobs, her old addresses, and any social media we could find. We found a lot of old posts and my stomach started to turn. We saw pictures of her with a different man. His name was Paul. He looked happy in the old pictures. But then we found a few posts from his friends who said he just disappeared from their lives. One of his old friends wrote, "Paul changed. He told me he just didn't want to hang out with us anymore, but I didn't believe it." It was the same story, the same words she used about David. Eleanor looked at me. "She's done this before, Margaret," she said. It was like looking at a roadmap of my own son's future. The truth was worse than I ever imagined. The next day, with Eleanor's help, I went on the computer again. We found David's old college alumni directory. I looked for the names of his old roommates and friends. I sent a simple email to all of them. I told them who I was and that I was worried about my son David. I asked if they had heard from him. It was a long shot. I got a few short answers, people saying they hadn't heard from him in a while. But then I got a call from one of his old roommates, a boy named Robert. His voice was full of concern. "I'm sorry to hear that, Margaret. We're all worried about David," he said. He told me they had tried to call him and get him to come out, but David always had an excuse. He said Sophia always told them David was too busy or not interested anymore. I felt my heart sink. She was a wall, a strong one, and she was cutting him off from everyone. "It's like she's keeping him away from us," Robert said. "We even invited him to my wedding last year. He never showed up or called to say congratulations. We never understood why." Now I did. I felt like a spy, talking to everyone in my son David's old life. The phone calls, the late nights on the computer, it was all for him. I knew I couldn't just keep digging. I had to talk to someone who knew his work life too. I found the number for his old boss, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had been a mentor to David. When I called, his voice was kind but sounded tired. "Margaret," he said, "I'm glad you called. I was just thinking about David." I asked him about David's new job and how he was doing. He sighed. "He's a smart boy, but he's not the same. He's always stressed, and he doesn't have the fire he used to have." My heart ached for my son. Mr. Henderson told me David wasn't putting in the extra hours and he wasn't as good with customers as he used to be. He told me that David was missing work. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. David was in line for a big promotion that would have paid him a lot more, but he turned it down. It would have meant he had to travel, and he said his wife, Sophia, wouldn't like that. It was a quiet threat, but I saw it for what it was. Sophia was not just taking my son's heart, she was taking his money too. The next day I had to do something I didn't want to do. I went to the bank. My son David and I had a savings account together. It was just a small thing for emergencies from when he was a boy. The woman at the counter, a nice lady named Mary, knew me. I asked her to check on the account. She looked at the screen and her face went from a smile to a frown. "Oh, Margaret," she said softly. "This account was closed last month." My stomach dropped. I hadn't closed it. I knew David hadn't either, not without telling me. "Who closed it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked uncomfortable but told me it had been closed and the money moved to a new account, a joint one with Sophia. It was just more proof. Sophia was cutting him off from everyone and everything that was a part of his old life. She was making him lean only on her, making him her prisoner. Mary looked at me with sad eyes. "I'm not supposed to say anything," she whispered. But it was strange. They made all the money hard to get to. It was locked up tight. She looked around the bank to make sure no one was listening. Sophia was a smart snake. I was having coffee with my neighbour Eleanor on her porch when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my son David's Aunt Carol. "Be careful, Margaret," she wrote. "Sophia just called me. She said she knows you've been talking to David's college friends about her." My blood ran cold. How did she know? I hadn't told anyone but my close family and Eleanor. I looked at Eleanor and her face was white. She must have someone watching us, I whispered. Eleanor said, maybe she has a friend on social media that knows us. I had a terrible thought. Was she paying someone to watch me? The power had shifted again. I had thought I was a smart detective, but she was a step ahead of me. She had been watching me while I was watching her. I realized that this wasn't just a game. It was a battle of minds. I had to be smarter. I couldn't trust anyone but my little group. I knew that she was a spy in my world, and I had to learn how she was getting her information. The next day, as I walked into the grocery store, I saw her cousin, who she had been close to, shopping in the same aisle as me. She quickly turned her head and walked away. I had a feeling I knew how Sophia knew. After I realized Sophia was spying on me through her cousin, I knew I had to be smarter. My son David and his friends and my family couldn't talk to me openly anymore. So I started what I called our underground railroad. We used old email addresses and burner phones. My neighbour Eleanor helped me set up a secret group chat. It was for me, David's old friends like Robert and Mark, and my family members like my sister-in-law Carol. We all promised not to talk about what we were doing with anyone else. We talked about David in secret, sharing what we knew and what we were worried about. We had to be quiet, like little mice, so Sophia wouldn't hear us. We all felt a little bit crazy, but we knew we were doing the right thing. It felt good to be a team. Then Robert, David's old roommate, sent a message. He said that a friend of his who works with phones told him something strange. David's phone, he wrote. It has a tracking app on it. Sophia can see where he is at all times. My blood went cold. He wasn't just a prisoner in his own mind. He was a prisoner in his own life. I knew I had to do something to get to my son David without making Sophia mad. I couldn't just call him anymore. So I decided on a different plan. I remembered how much my son used to love going to the city to watch basketball games, so I bought 2 tickets, one for him and one for me. I sent them to his work with a simple note that said, "Just in case you want to have some fun, son, no pressure." I knew he'd see the tickets, and I hoped he would remember all the good times we used to have. My heart ached for him. It was a risk, I knew, and I hoped it would work. I waited all night at the game, but he never came. I sat there, alone, watching the game, but all I could think about was my boy. Then, as I was leaving the game, he was standing there. My son was there. My heart jumped for joy. "Mom," he said, looking tired. I had to see you." But before we could say anything more, his phone rang. He looked at the caller ID, and a look of pure fear crossed his face. He said, "I gotta go," and he turned and ran. He didn't even say goodbye. My son David's quick visit and fearful look broke my heart, but I was also mad. I knew he was still being controlled, and I was going to fight for him. But before I could, Sophia struck back. She didn't call me. She went to my community. I was at the grocery store when a lady from my church walked by me and gave me a funny look. She didn't say hello. Then, at the beauty salon, a woman who always used to smile at me just looked away when I tried to say hello. It was like I had a sign on my forehead that said, "Bad person." My neighbour, Eleanor, came over that night and told me everything. "Sophia has been telling everyone at church that you are crazy, Margaret," she said. "She said you're obsessed with her and David and that you're trying to ruin their marriage." I was so mad. I had spent my whole life being a good person, and now this woman was destroying my reputation. I felt so alone. The next day I got a call from my pastor. "Margaret," he said, his voice grave. "There have been some concerning reports about you. Can you come to my office to talk?" After the pastor's call, I was feeling so low. I felt like everyone in town was looking at me funny, judging me for being crazy. I was at the pharmacy picking up my medicine when a woman I didn't know walked up to me. She was a little younger than me and looked nervous. "Are you Margaret?" she whispered. I nodded, and she looked around. My name is Linda. I work with Sophia. My heart started beating fast. I'm not supposed to talk to you, she said, her voice shaking a little. But Sophia is not a good person. She has a way of hurting people at work too. Linda told me Sophia was always watching her co-workers, trying to find out their secrets. She would tell the boss lies about them to get them in trouble. She tells the boss when people are sick or when they are late, Linda said. She is a spy in the office too. I'm scared to tell you more. She looked at me with sad eyes. She made my friend get fired just because she didn't like her. I was so shocked. I had thought it was just us, my family, but her poison was everywhere. She wasn't just controlling my son, she was controlling everyone around her. Linda looked at me one last time. She keeps a file on everyone, she whispered. She writes down everything. My son David's grandfather, my late husband's father, had a heart attack. The news went through our family like a lightning strike. It was a terrible thing to happen, but a part of me knew it was our only chance. This was a family gathering that Sophia couldn't stop. We all went to the hospital. David and Sophia were there, and I saw him from across the waiting room. He looked so small and scared. I walked over and touched his arm. He jumped, and a frightened look came over his face. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet. He wouldn't look at me, and he wouldn't look at his Aunt Carol or his Uncle Jim. He looked so out of place, like a stranger in his own family. "How is Grandpa?" he asked, looking at his feet. "He'll be okay," I said. "He just needs rest." I saw him look over at Sophia, and she had a hard look on her face. She was mad that he was even talking to me. Then a doctor came out to talk to us, and David just broke down crying. He put his head in his hands and sobbed. I put my arm around him, and he just let me hold him. I knew in my heart that it was not just about his grandfather, it was about everything. He didn't say a word, but his tears told me he was hurting. As we sat in the hospital waiting room, my son David's tears finally stopped. He looked tired but clear-eyed. He looked over at his Aunt Carol. "Aunt Carol," he said, "I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you were sick. I didn't know you had a bad flu." Aunt Carol looked at him, and her eyes got wide. "David, that was 2 years ago," she said. "I called and told you, but Sophia said you were too busy." David looked at her, then back at me, his face filled with shock. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I thought you were all fine." The silence in the waiting room was thick. I could almost see the puzzle pieces falling into place in my son's head. He looked at my brother, Jim. "Uncle Jim," he said, "I'm so sorry I missed your anniversary party. Sophia said you guys were having a small dinner." Jim just shook his head. "We had over 50 people there, son." David looked at me, a desperate look in his eyes. He was finally seeing the truth. He was seeing the walls Sophia had built around him. He looked straight at me, his voice barely a whisper. "Mum," he said, "what else haven't I been told?" A few days after the hospital, my phone rang late at night. The caller ID said unknown. I almost didn't answer it. "Mum?" It was my son, David. His voice was a whisper, as if he was hiding. He asked me about everything he had missed. "Did Uncle Jim really have a big party for his anniversary?" he asked. I told him the truth. A simple yes, and his silence on the other end felt heavy. He was torn between trusting his wife, Sophia, and believing the truth that was right in front of him. I didn't blame Sophia directly, but I told him what happened. "Sophia said you were too busy," I said. We talked for over an hour, just about little things like birthdays and funerals and parties he never knew about. He sounded so sad. He said, "I thought you were all mad at me for not being there." I wanted to tell him that I wasn't, that I loved him, but I knew I had to be careful. I was planting seeds of truth, hoping they would grow. He was like a lost little boy, and I was trying to help him find his way back home. Then he said something that broke my heart. "My cousin got married, and his father died last year. Sophia told me it didn't happen. Why would she do that? After his long conversation with me, my son David went home to Sophia. I waited for her to do something, and she did. The very next day, my sister-in-law Carol called me, mad as a wet hen. "Margaret, you're not going to believe this," she said. "Sophia just called me and told me David got a new job, a better job. It's a good job, but it's across the country." My heart sank. This was her last big move. She was going to take him away forever. My blood was cold. I knew this was her biggest threat yet. She was going to try to take him out of my life for good. I hung up the phone and walked to my living room window. I looked at the birds on my bird feeder. She was cornered like a scared animal and she was trying to get away. I knew this wasn't about a job. This was about control. This was about making sure my son, David, was all hers. I called his work and I got his voicemail. I left a simple message. "I love you, son." That afternoon, my phone rang. It was David. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, his voice quiet. "I don't want to move, but I don't know what to do." I almost cried. It was the first time he had ever told me he didn't want to do what Sophia wanted. David's phone call gave me hope. He was a person again, not just Sophia's toy. I called my little team, my sister-in-law Carol, my brother Jim, and my neighbour Eleanor. I also got David's friends Mark and Robert on the line. I told them we had to do something. We had to show David how many people loved him, how many people he had missed and how much he had lost. We came up with a plan to all meet at the town's community centre for a big lunch, a place where Sophia would not be. We made sure to sit at a table that David would have to walk by to get food. When my son David walked by, he saw all of us. His face went white. We all waved and smiled and he just stood there, looking at everyone. He looked like he was going to cry. He saw his uncle, his aunt, his cousins and his best friends all in one room. He looked at me and his eyes were full of tears. It was like he was waking up. He was seeing the full story for the first time. We all just smiled at him and let him be. Then his best friend Robert went over to him and said, "We need to talk. Just you and me, I can help." David nodded. "Okay," he said. My son David met his old friend Robert for coffee at a small diner far from his house. I had told Robert to be kind and just show David the truth, not to yell at him. Robert told me later that David looked like a scared deer. He just sat there, listening. Robert opened his phone and showed David all the old pictures from the last 3 years. The weddings, the birthday parties, the holidays David was never told about. "You were invited to all of these, buddy," Robert said softly. "Sophia said you didn't want to go." David just looked at the pictures, his face pale as a ghost. He looked so sad. Robert also showed him the messages. "Sophia said you were mad at me for no reason," David said, his voice barely a whisper. But then Robert showed him a screenshot of a message Sophia had sent to his friends. "David is so busy these days, he doesn't want to be around old friends," it said. David looked at the messages and he put his head in his hands. It was all a lie. He had lost 3 years of his life because of one woman. The truth was worse than I ever imagined. When my son David got home, he looked at his wife Sophia. All the love he had for her had turned to dust. He walked up to her and said, "Why did you lie to me?" She looked at him with big, fake eyes. "What are you talking about, dear?" she said. But he didn't stop. He said, "I know you told my friends and family that I didn't want to see them." He held up his phone and showed her the proof. Her sweet act fell away like a broken mask. Her face went hard and mean. "They're lying!" she screamed. "They're trying to ruin us because they don't like me." She started to cry, but there were no tears. She ran to the kitchen drawer and grabbed a knife. "If you're going to leave me, I'll just end it all," she screamed. David was so scared. He didn't know what to do. He saw her for the first time, not as a sweet wife, but as a cruel person. He ran from the kitchen and locked himself in the bathroom, shaking and crying. He finally called me. "Mom," he sobbed. "I don't know what to do. She's crazy." My son David's phone call was short, but it told me everything. He was finally seeing the truth. His world was crumbling, and he was terrified. He was like a lost little boy. I didn't say a word. I just listened to him cry on the phone. "She said she was pregnant, Mom," he sobbed. "But I don't know if I can believe her." It was a lie to get him to stay. She was using a baby to keep him. She was a monster. I had to be strong. "It's your choice, honey," I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. "You can stay there and believe her lies, or you can come home and be with the people who love you." I knew it was a hard choice. He could keep living a quiet, sad lie, or he could come home and face the truth. I knew what I wanted him to do, but it had to be his choice. He was silent on the other end of the line. I heard him take a deep breath. "I can't do this anymore, Mom," he said, his voice shaking. "I think I need help. Can you come get me?" I drove to my son David's house as fast as my old car would go. My heart was pounding in my chest, a drum of fear and anger. When I got there, I heard it. A woman's high-pitched scream, full of rage. It was my daughter-in-law, Sophia. I saw her throwing a lamp against the wall. She was madder than a wet hen. I ran to the door and tried to open it, but it was locked. I heard David's muffled voice, a weak cry from inside. "Mom, I'm in the bathroom. She's got a knife." My hands shook so hard I could barely dial my phone. I had to be strong. The old key I still had to his old house wouldn't work. I kicked the door once, twice, but it wouldn't open. I ran back to my car, got out a hammer and hit the door. It made a loud bang noise. Sophia was screaming louder now. She was a different person, a wild animal. "You're trying to kidnap him," she shrieked. Then she opened the front door, looked at me, and with pure evil in her eyes, she pulled out her phone. "Help! Help!" she screamed. "My mother-in-law is trying to kidnap my husband." The police came right away. Sophia was a picture of a sad wife, crying and pointing at me. She told the police I was a bad person trying to break up her marriage. I just stood there trying to stay calm. The police officer looked at me, then at my son, David. "What's going on, sir?" the police officer asked. David looked from me to Sophia, and his face was white with fear. He couldn't go back in there. He looked at the officer and said, "I'm scared of her. I don't want to go home with her." Sophia's face went from sad to angry in a second. "He's just upset. He loves me," she yelled. But the police officer saw the truth in my son's eyes. He saw how scared my son was. The officer spoke to David away from Sophia. David told him everything, all the lies, all the control. The police officer told him, "You're a grown man, but this sounds like a serious case of abuse. I can't make her stay away from you, but I can help you find a place to go." He gave David a card for a special kind of counselor. "This person helps people who have been hurt like you. It's called domestic violence," he said. David just held the card, his hand shaking. It was the first time someone had put a name to what was happening to him. My son David came home with me that night. We sat in my living room, and it felt like a long time since we had been together just like that. He was quiet, just sitting on the couch, staring into space. He still couldn't believe everything that had happened. The next day, he called the counsellor on the card the police officer gave him. The counsellor was a kind voice on the phone. David told the counsellor everything, from the small lies to the big ones, from the closed bank account to his missed friendships. He talked for hours. After he hung up, he looked at me, his eyes full of pain and shame. "I let her do it, Mum," he said. "I should have known better." I just shook my head. "No, honey," I said. "She was a smart liar." The counsellor later told David that Sophia's actions were textbook coercive control. She explained how a person can be hurt without being hit. She said Sophia's kind of abuse was about taking away my son's freedom, little by little. Then the counsellor told David something that made his face go pale. "I have heard of Sophia before. This is a pattern with her," she said. It was the moment my son knew that it wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. My son David was safe at my house, but the fight wasn't over. Sophia started a new kind of war, a public one. She began posting on social media, saying she was a lonely, sad wife. "My husband left me for his mother," she wrote on Facebook. "He is having a mental breakdown." She even posted pictures of herself crying. She was trying to make my son look crazy so nobody would believe him. My friends and family who knew the truth were mad. My sister-in-law Carol told me that Sophia was calling everyone she knew, telling them lies about David and me. "She is a good liar," Carol said. "Everyone feels bad for her." But my little group of friends and family had to fight back. We didn't post things on the computer, but we told the truth to anyone who would listen. We told them how David was scared to come home. We told them all about Sophia's lies. But the most dangerous thing happened when David's boss called me. "I got a very upsetting email from your daughter-in-law, Sophia," he said. "She says David is not doing well and is having a mental breakdown." My stomach dropped. I knew she was trying to get him fired. After Sophia started her public lies, my son David's friends and family knew we had to do something big. We had to show the world the truth. We all started collecting everything we knew. My neighbour, Eleanor, printed out the old social media posts she had found about Sophia's ex-fiancé, Paul. My sister-in-law, Carol, wrote down all the lies Sophia had told her. My brother, Jim, wrote down the lies Sophia had told him. And I wrote down every phone call, every lie, and every secret my son, David, had told me. We had a stack of papers so big it was scary. We took it to a lawyer, a very serious man who said what we had was a strong case for a restraining order. It wasn't about hitting or yelling. It was about the kind of control that leaves a person with no voice and no freedom. The people in our community started to see the truth. They came to me and said, "I'm so sorry, Margaret. I should have known something was wrong." But what really changed things was when my phone rang and a man said, "My name is Paul. I used to be engaged to Sophia. I know what you're going through." When I told my son David that Sophia's ex-fiancé Paul had called, he went white. He talked to Paul for hours. Paul told David the same sad story I already knew. Sophia had cut him off from his family, his friends, and his money. She had told him lies and made him feel crazy. It was the same story, just a different person. David realized he wasn't alone. He wasn't the first person she had done this to. His shame turned into anger. "She can't do this to anyone else," he said. "She can't get away with this." The little group of us who had been fighting in the dark finally had a way to win. We weren't just a few people with a problem. We were many people who had been hurt by the same person. We all met at the community centre. David stood up straight, holding the stack of papers. "My name is David," he said, his voice shaky at first, "and this is my story." He started from the beginning, and as he talked, Paul stood up, and so did David's friends, and his family, and everyone who had been hurt. They all stood there to show they were with him. "She won't hurt anyone else," he said. And the room was quiet. We were ready to make our story public. Our church's family night was not what anyone expected. I sat with my son David and all of our friends and family. It was a normal potluck, with food everywhere. Then, my son David stood up. My hands were shaking, but his voice was strong. He told everyone how he had been cut off from his family and friends. "I thought you all hated me," he said. The room was quiet. As he was talking, my daughter-in-law Sophia walked in. She was supposed to be at a fancy dinner, but I guess she had a feeling something was wrong. Her eyes got big when she saw everyone. She looked at David and she looked at me. My brother Jim stood up and said, "Sophia told me David didn't want to come to my anniversary party." Then my sister-in-law Carol stood up. She said he didn't care about his sick grandpa. It was like a little war. Everyone was telling their story. Sophia's face got red. "You are all liars!" she screamed. "You're just trying to ruin my life!" She was screaming, but nobody was listening. Everyone was watching her face, her mask completely gone. My neighbours, Eleanor and Mark, stood up. "She told me you were trying to kidnap him, Margaret," Mark said. Sophia looked at everyone in the room and said, "You will all be sorry for this." My son David's confrontation with Sophia at the church was a mess, but it was a good mess. The whole room had seen her true self. Her screaming and her threats were loud enough for everyone to hear. What she didn't know was that a lot of people had their phones out. They were all recording her. The next day, the video was everywhere. It was on the news and on the internet. Everyone in our small town saw it. Sophia's face, full of hate and rage, was on every computer and every phone. The whole town was talking. My son David looked at the videos and he just shook his head. "I can't believe it," he said. He had a hard time believing that this was the same woman he married. But the video didn't lie. She was out of control, and everyone saw it. I got a call from a lady at my church. "Margaret," she said, "I am so sorry, we were all wrong about you." My heart felt a little lighter, but the best part was a phone call my son David got from his boss. "David," he said, "I just saw the video. I'm sorry, I get it now." Sophia's workplace saw the video and they knew it was bad. She was the talk of the town. My son, David's old friend Linda, who worked with Sophia, got a call from her boss. They were doing an investigation. Linda told me she finally had the courage to tell her boss all of Sophia's bad deeds. She told him how Sophia would tell lies about her co-workers, how she would spy on them, and how she would make up stories to get them in trouble. Other co-workers, who had also been scared, started to come forward. They told stories about Sophia being mean and scary. She had built her whole life on lies. It was a house of cards, and it was all falling down. I was at the grocery store when I saw her talking to her boss. She looked angry, and he looked serious. A few days later, I heard she was fired. My son David told me she had called him screaming. "You ruined my life!" she yelled. She told him she was going to sue everyone who had told the truth about her. But she couldn't sue the truth. She had nothing. My son was free. My son David was so brave. After everything, he went to the courthouse with all of our papers and got a restraining order against my daughter-in-law, Sophia. The lawyer helped him. He told the judge everything, every lie, every time she made him miss a family event. He told the judge how she controlled his money and his life. He told the judge how he was scared. All the papers from his friends and family made the judge believe him. The judge looked at Sophia and said, "You are not allowed to go near this man." Sophia, who was standing there with a lawyer, started to cry, but her tears were dry. She said she was the victim. "He is having a breakdown," she said, pointing at my son. But the judge had heard all the facts and she didn't believe her. My son David looked so proud and so tired at the same time. He was finally free. But the freedom didn't last long. I was at my kitchen table talking to Eleanor when my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and my heart stopped. It was Sophia. She was smiling. The restraining order had been served just a few hours ago, but she was already breaking the law. I didn't open the door for my daughter-in-law, Sophia. I called the police right away. My neighbour Eleanor was with me and she was scared too. Sophia was screaming outside saying she loved my son David and that she wasn't going to leave. My son was hiding in the living room, shaking like a leaf. He was so scared of her. I told him to be quiet. When the police came, they told Sophia she was breaking the law. She started to cry and scream and she fell on the ground, saying she was hurt. But the police didn't believe her. They had already seen her video from the church. They had heard my son David's story. They put her in a police car and took her away. As they were putting her in the car, a woman and a man ran up to the car. "Mom!" the woman yelled. It was Sophia's mother and father. "She's just having a bad day," her mother said. They were so worried about her. But her father looked at my son David and then at me, and his eyes were sad. He knew what she had done. Sophia was a lost cause, and I knew she needed help, not jail. The day after Sophia was arrested, her family came to my house. They looked so sad and tired. Sophia's mother, who I'd never really talked to, came up to me and said, "I am so sorry, Margaret." She said that Sophia had been this way for a long time. She said she had done this to other people before. Her father, a quiet man, told my son David, "I knew this would happen. She has a way of hurting people." They told us that they had been cleaning up her mess for years. They would pay off the people she hurt and make sure they didn't get in trouble. They even helped her ex-fiancé Paul get his money back. They were enablers, but they didn't know how to stop her. My son David just sat there, listening. He looked so sad. He had lost 3 years of his life to this, but then Sophia's mother said something that made my blood run cold. "We have to go now," she said. "We have to go get her sister. She is doing the same thing to a man in the next town over." My son David was finally safe. He stayed with me, and we had our coffee every morning. But he was not all the way better. He was like a broken vase, all in pieces. He started to go to a special kind of doctor, a counsellor. He would talk for hours, and he would come home tired. He had a lot of work to do. He had to learn how to trust himself again. He was so mad at himself for letting Sophia do this to him. "I should have known better, Mum," he would say. "I'm a grown man." But I would tell him, "No, honey. She was a good liar." His friends, Mark and Robert, came over a lot. They would just sit and talk to him. They didn't even care about the past. They just wanted to be with him. He was starting to smile again. But I had to face a hard truth. I had to look at myself. I had always been the strong one, the one who took care of everyone. I had made my son, David, feel like I could fix all of his problems. I was a good mother, but maybe I had been too good. Maybe I had made him too safe. I knew I had to face my own mistakes, and that was a scary thing. I knew I had to get help too. I went to my own counsellor. It was a strange feeling, sitting in a big chair and talking about my feelings. The counsellor was a kind lady, and she listened to me. I told her how I felt like I had to fix everything for my son, David. My job was to protect him, I said. And I did. But the counsellor told me that my love was so big that it didn't leave room for him to grow. I had to learn how to be a mother to a grown man, not a little boy. I had to learn how to be his friend, not his boss. It was hard work. My son David and I started talking about our past. He told me that when he was a boy, he always came to me for help. "I never had to figure things out on my own, Mum," he said. He said he was always used to people taking care of him, so it was easy for Sophia to take over his life. It was a hard thing to hear, but it was the truth. We had to break our old ways so we could make a new, better way. I had to let him be a man, and he had to learn how to be one. I knew that it was my time to grow too. After we both went to our own counsellors, my son David and I started to go to one together. We talked about everything, from his childhood to his marriage. It was like we were building a new house brick by brick. We had to tear down the old walls of our relationship to build a new one. The counsellor was a good guide. She helped us talk about our feelings without getting mad. I told him how scared I was for him, and he told me he was sorry for not telling me sooner. He was learning how to be a strong man who could make his own choices. He was getting better at trusting himself. Then one day, the counsellor asked David a hard question. "What would you do if Sophia came to you and said she was getting help?" David didn't have an answer. He just looked at me and I looked at him. I could see the pain in his eyes. He had to choose between his past and his future. He had to choose between the woman he loved and the truth. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, was in a hospital. Her parents put her there. The judge told her she had to go or she would go to jail for breaking the restraining order. She had a choice to make: get help or stay a monster. My son, David, felt a little bad for her. "She's not all bad, Mum," he said. But I told him, "Honey, she's sick, but she made a choice to hurt people." Her parents came to my house and told me what the doctors were saying. They said Sophia had a lot of problems and she didn't know how to stop hurting people. But they also said she had to want to get better. It was her choice to take the help or not. The war was over, but the work was not. Sophia had to face her own demons. My son, David, was finally able to get a new apartment. He was so happy. He was free. But a few days later, my phone rang. It was a man's voice and he sounded scared. "Is this Margaret?" he asked. "My name is John. I'm engaged to Sophia's sister. She has been telling me lies about my family and I don't know who to trust." My heart sank. There was another one. When my son David heard about Sophia's sister, he didn't get scared. He got angry. He had to help this new man, John. "She can't get away with this again," he said. He and I went to our local coffee shop and talked to John. My son David looked him in the eye and said, "I know what you're going through. She lied to me too. Her sister is the same." John looked so confused and sad, just like my son used to look. We gave him all our papers, all our proof, all our stories. My son David was a hero. He was a helper now, not a victim. He had learned so much from what had happened to him. We showed John the videos, the bank papers, everything. We told him about Paul, the other man she had hurt. It was like we were a little army of people who had been hurt and had come back to fight. We were paying it forward. We were helping someone else so they didn't have to go through what we did. We knew that this wasn't the end. There might be more people out there who needed our help. We had a new job now, and it was to help others. The new year started and things were good. My son David was living in his own apartment, and it was a happy place. He still came to see me on Sundays for dinner. He gave me a key to his new place. "Here, Mum," he said. "You can visit whenever you want, but call first." I smiled. He was a grown man now, with healthy boundaries. I was a proud mother who knew how to let go. We were happy. Sophia's family took her to a special kind of hospital far away. She was getting help, but she still had a lot of work to do. My son David got a new job, a better one, and his boss told him he was the best worker he had ever had. My family was all talking to each other again, and the community was good to me. My son and I started a new group in our town, a group for people who have been hurt by bad people. We called it The New Address. It was a place for people to come and get help and find a new home, a new family, and a new life. My son David was no longer a boy who needed me to protect him. He was a man who knew how to protect himself and others. And that was the best thing a mother could ever ask for.